"You're a useless child of failure," my father barked, his voice cold, sharp, and soaked in arrogance. The living room was packed with family, lawyers, and the smug air of finality. My brother, Calvin, stood beside him, grinning like he had already won. And maybe he had, or so they thought. My chest tightened. I stood still, frozen by the weight of a truth I'd carried for years, waiting for this very moment. "I'm giving everything to Calvin," my father announced to the room, holding the inheritance file like a trophy. "He deserves it more, you don't." Gasps rippled. My mother blinked, unsure whether to stop him or let it happen. My uncle looked away, uncomfortable. Only the lawyer sat still, his fingers gently curled over the edge of the folder on the table, silent, unreadable. I didn't move. I didn't plead. I didn't protest. My father leaned down with that same smirk I'd grown up resenting, signing the last page with a slow, satisfied stroke.
Done.
But just as he pushed the file across the table with a smug smile, the lawyer cleared his throat and said sharply, "Actually, there's something you need to know." The room went silent. My brother's grin faltered. My father narrowed his eyes. "What is this, Charles?" The lawyer opened a small envelope, sliding out a second document, yellowed slightly with time. "This was a sealed instruction from your late father, Mr. Ramsey. He left a clause. One that overrides everything. My grandfather. The only man who had ever treated me like I wasn't a disappointment." The lawyer turned to me, then back to the room. "Your daughter, Lana, was named the rightful executor and majority beneficiary 5 years ago." The file slipped from my father's fingers. My brother's jaw dropped. "You're lying," Calvin blurted out, stepping forward. "No," I finally spoke calmly. "You just never thought to ask what Grandpa and I used to talk about during those walks after dinner. You thought kindness was weakness. Turns out, it's what Grandpa valued most." The lawyer nodded. "She owns 68% of the estate. That includes the vineyard, the antique house in Cape May, and the publishing shares. She's also the executor, which means she decides what happens next." My hands were still. My voice didn't shake. But my heart was finally free. And no one in that room saw it coming. My brother stumbled back like someone had punched him in the gut. "You can't do this." Calvin's voice cracked, his cocky facade shattering like glass underfoot. "She didn't earn it. She was just folding napkins at some hotel last year." The air grew heavier. "You're right," I said softly, looking him straight in the eye. "I was folding napkins, and checking people into rooms, and working doubles at the cafe to pay off Mom's hospital bills when you were too busy taking selfies on your yacht." The silence in the room was louder than any scream. My mother flinched. Her eyes, once filled with quiet disappointment, were now rimmed with something else, shame. The lawyer didn't flinch. "This decision is final. Mr. Ramsey had it notarized and witnessed. Lana has been legally in control of the assets for the past 4 years. She simply chose not to exercise her power until now." The moment felt surreal, as if time had paused to let them all sit in the weight of their misjudgment. My father stepped forward slowly, voice quieter now, almost forced. "Lana, sweetheart, let's talk." "I didn't mean—" "You meant every word," I said without bitterness. "But I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for what's right. Grandpa trusted me because I didn't want anything, and that's exactly why he gave me everything. My words weren't revenge. They were truth. And truth, delivered gently, cuts deeper than rage ever could." I turned to Charles, the lawyer. "I'll be keeping the vineyard and the house. The publishing shares, I want to reinvest half into a fund for girls who want to study literature and journalism. Grandpa said dreams deserve legs." Charles smiled faintly. "He did say that." Calvin scoffed. "So, what, you're some hero now? You think that makes you better than us?" "No," I replied, turning to leave. "I think it just means I learned to stand alone when no one else would stand beside me." And with that I walked out of the room. Behind me, I could hear my father calling my name, quieter, desperate. My mother whispering something unintelligible. Calvin slamming a door. But I didn't stop. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking away empty-handed. I was walking away in control. The hallway outside the estate room was quiet, lined with paintings I used to stare at as a child, portraits of ancestors who seemed to look down at me like I didn't belong. Funny how now, every frame felt like it was silently nodding in approval. I stepped outside. The sun had started to set, casting golden streaks across the sky, like the day itself was exhaling with me. Behind me, I heard fast footsteps, heels clicking in an erratic rhythm. Lana, wait. It was my mother. I paused but didn't turn around right away. Her voice had a weight to it, tired, unsure. So different from the woman who used to quietly stand by my father's side, never defending me, never questioning him. I didn't know, she said breathlessly, stopping a few steps behind me. I didn't know your grandfather had done that. He never told me. I finally turned, slowly. Her eyes were glassy. You didn't want to know, I replied gently. I told you once that he always asked me about my writing, that he said my heart mattered more than numbers. You laughed. Said I was being dramatic. She flinched. I was scared. Your father, he always made the decisions. I just followed. That's the thing, Mom, I said, voice soft but resolute. You followed while he crushed me. You watched when he mocked me. You stayed silent when Calvin spread lies about me. I wasn't just being pushed down. I was being buried alive, and you stood there with a shovel in your hand and looked away. Her lips trembled. I'm sorry, I exhaled. I believe you. But forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. She reached into her purse shakily and pulled out a folded letter. Your grandfather told me to give you this when the time came. I didn't know what he meant, but I think this is it. I took the letter with both hands, staring at the familiar, slightly shaky handwriting across the envelope. For Lana, only when they forget who she really is. Tears threatened to well up as I opened it slowly. Inside, Grandpa's words spilled out with the warmth I remembered so well. My dearest Lana, if you're reading this, it means they've finally seen what I always saw in you. The world will try to measure you with money, titles, or trophies. But I measured you with silence, because in silence, you were still kind. In darkness, you still lit candles for others. That's power. I gave you control not because you demanded it, but because you didn't. Use this moment not to punish, but to teach. With love, always.
Grandpa.
I closed the letter, my hands trembling. My mother was crying now, quietly, like she didn't know how to ask for a second chance. I didn't offer words. I just nodded once, slowly. It was enough. Because forgiveness is a process, not a performance. That night, I sat on the balcony of the estate I now owned, looking over the vineyard. The stars above me blinked into view, silent, ancient witnesses. I opened my laptop and began writing again for the first time in months. Not for revenge, not for proof, but for myself. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't writing to escape. I was writing because I had arrived. The next morning, the estate was quieter than I'd ever known it. Even the air felt still, as if the wind itself was waiting to see what I would do next. I stood at the head of the dining room table where, just yesterday, I had been treated like an invisible guest. Now the staff greeted me with cautious respect, their eyes watching for a clue. Was I going to become like the man who ruled before me? Or was something different beginning? I wasn't interested in power for power's sake. I was interested in healing. But healing often comes wrapped in uncomfortable choices. I asked Charles, the lawyer, to gather everyone back in the room by noon. Not to scold them, not to shame them, but because there were things that needed to be said, truths that had gone unspoken for too long. By 11:30, they began to trickle in. Calvin entered last, his steps slower than usual, his once proud posture visibly smaller. My father sat in the same chair he had occupied yesterday, but this time, he didn't speak first. I stood instead. I'm not here to take revenge, I began, scanning the faces of the people who'd overlooked me my whole life. I'm not here to humiliate anyone, though I'd be lying if I said yesterday didn't feel like justice. No one laughed. No one dared to. But I also believe that people are more than their worst moments, I continued. So here's what's going to happen. I took a deep breath. Calvin, you'll retain the lake house. Grandpa knew how much you loved it, even if he didn't trust you to manage his estate. You'll need to handle the property taxes and upkeep, but it's yours. My brother blinked, stunned. Why would you? Because spite doesn't build anything, I replied. But boundaries do. I turned to my father next. I will not be evicting you from this house. But from this day forward, you will no longer have control over the staff, the operations, or the finances. You may live here under one condition: respect. For everyone, including me. He looked down at his hands. Silent. Not proud. Just old. Older than I had ever seen him. And you, Mom? I faced her, voice gentler now. I'm offering you something better than an apology. I'm offering a chance to be someone else. Someone better. You can be part of my life, but only if you start showing up. She nodded slowly, mouth quivering, holding back tears. Then I placed the final folder on the table, one that wasn't from Grandpa's safe, but one I had created myself. A foundation. The Ramsey Legacy Fund. For years, this family profited off a name that was respected in public, but cold behind closed doors. I'm going to change that. This fund will support women from small towns who want to study, build businesses, or heal from what they were told they could never do. I looked around. I want to build something that outlives all of us. No one applauded. They just listened. And sometimes, silence is more powerful than applause. I sat back down. Calvin stood up shakily. I don't get it. You had every right to throw us all out. Why didn't you? I met his gaze. Because Grandpa didn't raise me to burn down broken things. He raised me to rebuild them, with stronger hands and a softer heart. And for the first time, Calvin didn't argue. He nodded. Later that evening, as golden light poured into the windows, I walked the vineyard rows barefoot. The soil beneath me felt alive, like a whisper from the past rising through the roots. I paused at Grandpa's favorite bench, sat down, closed my eyes. This was not about revenge. This was about reclaiming every piece of myself they had tried to silence. Not loudly, but permanently. The weeks that followed were filled with quiet transformations, not the dramatic kind that made headlines, but the kind that mattered in the softest corners of life. The house began to shift. Rooms once filled with tension now echoed with footsteps of hope. I had the portraits in the hallway restored, not just of the men who ran the estate, but I commissioned new ones, of my grandmother, who raised 2 generations of strength behind silence, of the workers who'd been loyal to this land longer than my father had bothered to acknowledge. And yes, even one of Grandpa, not standing proudly, but seated with a notebook, smiling, as I remembered him best. But beneath all that change, I was changing too. Because the truth is, when you've spent your whole life being told you're not enough, you don't heal just because the world starts clapping. You heal when you learn to stop apologizing for existing. You heal when you stop needing permission to matter. And that's what I was learning to do, day by day. One afternoon, as the sun blazed high above the vineyard, a delivery arrived for me at the front gate. A simple box, no return address. I carried it into the study, sat down, and opened it slowly. Inside, neatly stacked, were dozens of old pages. Typed. Annotated. Yellowed by time. It was my writing. Stories I had written at 16, tucked away in Grandpa's old leather trunk. I didn't even know he'd saved them. On top was a note, written in his same steady hand. Lana, some voices aren't meant to be loud. Some are meant to be clear. Yours was always the latter. Don't let anyone convince you again that being quiet means being powerless. These stories are the beginning, not the end. Share them when you're ready. With all my love. Grandpa. I wept over that box like a child. Not because I was sad, but because I was finally free. Not just legally, not just financially, but spiritually. Months later, I published my first collection of stories under a small imprint I created through the publishing shares Grandpa left me. The book wasn't a bestseller. It didn't win awards. But the emails I received from women, strangers in small towns, young girls working night shifts, single mothers writing on napkins between shifts, those messages meant everything. Your story made me feel seen. I thought I was alone. I didn't know quiet girls could rise. That was the legacy Grandpa wanted me to carry. And I was doing it not through revenge, not through power, but through presence. Then one evening, as I sat alone on the porch, sipping tea, watching the horizon melt into gold and lavender, a familiar voice broke the stillness. Lana. I turned. It was my father. Older now, a bit hunched, hands clasped in front of him like he wasn't sure if he was welcome. His eyes didn't hold the same fire. Just the glow of something gentler, maybe even remorse. I wanted to say thank you, he said, standing awkwardly near the porch steps. For not turning your back. For not being like me. I didn't answer right away. Just studied him. The man who had once broken me with words sharper than knives, now standing there, stripped of pride. I gestured to the rocking chair beside me. He hesitated. Then sat. For minutes we said nothing. The silence was uncomfortable at first, then necessary. And eventually he spoke. Your grandfather was right about you. I nodded. I know. That night, I returned to the study and added a new line to the dedication in my manuscript. For the girls who were told they were too quiet to be great. For the women who were told they were too soft to lead. And for the child I once was. You were never useless. You were just unheard. Until now. And that was the real twist. Not a billionaire's secret. Not a courtroom shock. But a girl they all overlooked, who learned that kindness doesn't mean weakness. And silence? Silence can carry storms.